I still remember the first day I met her, the woman who would become both my biggest critic and years later the person who couldn't live without me. My mother-in-law, Evelyn Harper, was a vision of old money arrogance and cold perfection. The moment I stepped into her house, I knew I was being measured. My clothes, my accent, my every move silently catalogued and judged behind that tight, polite smile. She extended her hand like a queen greeting a peasant. "So you're the one my son couldn't stop talking about," she said, her tone syrupy sweet, but her eyes sharp, assessing, cruel, told another story. I smiled nervously, clutching the small bouquet of lilies I'd brought. "Yes, Mrs. Harper. I'm Julia." She took the flowers with the kind of look people give to an unwanted gift and handed them off to the maid. "Well," she said, "let's hope you can handle our family. We have standards here." Her words hung in the air, thick with meaning. I didn't know it then, but that sentence would set the tone for the next several years of my life. It started small, the passive-aggressive remarks, the judgment disguised as advice. "Julia dear, maybe you shouldn't wear such bright lipstick. It's not very classy. Are you sure you can cook for Daniel? He's used to certain kinds of meals. I just don't think you understand how we do things in this family." Every word chipped away at my confidence like a sculptor chiseling stone. Only she wasn't creating art. She was carving away my sense of worth. Daniel, my husband, loved me in his own quiet way, but he was weak when it came to his mother. She'd raised him to believe she was always right, and so he often stood silently between us, a bystander in his own marriage. The Harper family was old money, deeply rooted in tradition, reputation, and appearances. Their mansion stood on a hill like a symbol of everything I wasn't: grand, intimidating, and cold. I came from a middle-class family in Ohio. My parents owned a small bakery, where I'd learned that love was best expressed through effort, not status. Evelyn, however, believed love was a transaction, a hierarchy where everyone had to know their place. And she made sure I knew mine. The first time she told me I'd never fit in was at a dinner party. I tried so hard, spent the entire day cooking, decorating, and making sure every detail was perfect. It was my first time hosting something for the Harper Circle, a chance to prove myself. Everything seemed to go well until dessert. One of the guests, a woman dripping in diamonds, laughed and said, "Julia dear, this chocolate soufflé is divine. Where did you learn to make it?" I smiled proud. "My mom taught me. She used to bake every Sunday. It's her recipe." Evelyn's smile froze. "Ah," she said, voice sharp but calm. "Homemade recipes from small-town bakers. How quaint." The table fell silent. I felt the color rise to my cheeks, but I forced a polite laugh. "Yes, she's wonderful. Everyone loves her desserts." Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "I'm sure she's very sweet, dear. But some of us prefer to keep things a little more refined." The laughter that followed was polite, shallow, and cruel. And that's when she leaned closer to me, pretending to adjust her napkin, and whispered the words I would never forget. "You'll never fit in here, Julia. Not in this family. Not in this world." I sat there frozen, smiling through the humiliation while my heart broke in silence. Daniel didn't hear her, but I saw the smirk she gave me, small, victorious, the kind a predator gives when it's certain of its prey. That night, I cried quietly in the bathroom, the sound of my sobs muffled by running water. I told myself I'd try harder, that maybe if I just became the kind of woman she wanted, she'd accept me. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. If I dressed elegantly, I was trying too hard. If I spoke my mind, I was too bold. If I stayed quiet, I was too dull. It became a pattern, her constant belittling, her manipulation, her subtle reminders that I didn't belong. She controlled everything: what we ate, who we saw, even the color of the curtains in our home, which she insisted on helping decorate properly. Over time, I started to disappear. I became the version of Julia that was easier to live with: silent, compliant, forgettable. Until one day, something inside me broke. It was a Sunday afternoon. Daniel was working late, and I was cleaning the kitchen after another exhausting family lunch. Evelyn had criticized everything again: the food, my posture, the way I spoke to the housekeeper. As she left, she turned back and said, "You'll thank me one day, Julia. I'm only trying to make you better." Better. Like I was some project to be fixed. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. My eyes were tired, my smile fake. I'd lost my laughter, my spark, my voice. And that's when I made a promise to myself. If she wanted a war, I'd stop playing nice. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a burning clarity I hadn't felt in years. For too long, I'd lived under Evelyn Harper's shadow, trying to please her, trying to fit into a world that was never built for me. But something inside me had shifted. It didn't happen overnight, of course. Change rarely does. But that morning was the beginning of the end, of her control, of my fear, of everything that kept me small. I started quietly. I stopped asking for her approval. I began saying no, not loudly, not defiantly, but with calm, unshakable certainty. When she criticized the way I folded the napkins at dinner, I simply smiled and said, "I like them this way." When she mocked my cooking, I replied, "Then don't eat it." It was subtle, but it shook her. She wasn't used to resistance. Not from me, not from anyone. She started calling Daniel more often, complaining that I was changing, that I was becoming disrespectful. He'd listen, torn between the two women in his life, but I no longer cared about winning his mother's affection. I was too busy finding myself. I went back to school. Something I'd always wanted but had shelved after marriage. I enrolled in a business program at a local college, taking evening classes while managing our home during the day. Evelyn, of course, had something to say about that too. "A degree? At your age? That's adorable, Julia. But perhaps you should focus on being a proper wife instead of chasing childish dreams." I smiled. Maybe. But childish dreams build grown empires. She laughed then, a sharp mocking sound. "You'll never have what it takes." But I didn't need her belief. I had my own. Those years were hard. Balancing school, part-time work, and a crumbling marriage wasn't easy. Daniel and I had grown distant. His silence had become a wall between us, one built brick by his mother's whispers. Sometimes I'd see flashes of the man I married, gentle, kind, lost. But Evelyn had made sure he depended on her for approval the same way I once had. And so, I stopped waiting for him to choose me. I chose myself. By the time I graduated, I had a plan. I started a small event planning company. Ever After Events. The irony wasn't lost on me. I built a business around making people's dreams come true while mine had nearly been destroyed. At first it was tough, rejections, low-paying gigs, endless hours. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered Evelyn's voice in my head. "You'll never fit in." And I'd work harder. Within 3 years, the company took off. I had clients all over the city, from corporate galas to celebrity weddings. My business became known for precision, luxury, and heart. The one thing Evelyn's world lacked. And then came the night everything changed. It was a charity gala. A massive event hosted by none other than Evelyn Harper herself. She didn't know who was managing it. Her assistant had hired us under a partner company's name. When I walked into the grand ballroom to oversee the setup, I felt my pulse quicken. The chandeliers glowed like stars, the air buzzing with music and laughter. And then I saw her, standing by the entrance wearing her signature pearls, commanding attention like the queen she believed she was. When she saw me, her face froze. "Julia." Her voice was sharp with disbelief. "What on earth are you doing here?" I smiled, calm and poised. "Running the event. I own Ever After Events. Your assistant hired my company." Her expression flickered between shock and outrage. "You? You run this?" "Yes," I said softly. "And I must say, Mrs. Harper, it's one of the most beautiful galas I've ever organized. I do hope you enjoy it." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. The night went flawlessly. Guests praised the decor, the music, the arrangements, all of it. Every compliment was a quiet victory. Every toast a reminder that I no longer needed her approval. By the end of the night, Evelyn's friends surrounded me, asking for my card, congratulating me on my success. And Evelyn stood there, silent, watching the woman she once dismissed now command a room she thought she owned. When the event ended, she pulled me aside. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed. I looked at her, not with anger but with pity. "No," I said. "It just shows that you were wrong about me." Her lips trembled. "You'll always be an outsider, Julia." I smiled. "Maybe. But at least I built my own world instead of ruling over a hollow one." Then I walked away. Months passed. I rarely saw her after that night. My business grew, and for the first time in years I felt free. I bought my own home, surrounded by friends who treated me with the respect I'd always craved. But life, as it often does, had another twist waiting. It started with a phone call from Daniel. His voice was shaky, tired. "Juliet's mom. She's not doing well." Evelyn had suffered a stroke. The once dominant matriarch who had ruled every room with her words could barely speak. Her right side was paralyzed. Daniel was overwhelmed. He had work, bills, and no one to care for her full time. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The irony was too loud to ignore. He hesitated, then asked, "Can you help?" There it was, the moment I never thought would come. The woman who told me I'd never belong now needed me. I could have said no. I could have walked away, justified and proud. But something deeper called to me, not forgiveness, not love, but closure. "Yes," I said finally. "I'll take care of her." When I arrived at her house, it was eerily quiet. The woman who once commanded staff and guests now sat in silence, confined to a chair by the window. Her eyes met mine, wide and uncertain. For the first time, she didn't look powerful. She looked small. "Hello, Evelyn," I said softly. She tried to speak, but her words came out slurred, barely a whisper. I began visiting daily, helping with meals, managing her medication, arranging therapy sessions. I didn't do it out of affection. I did it because watching her need me, the woman she once deemed unworthy, was the sweetest justice life could give. Every time I fed her soup or brushed her hair, I remembered her words. "You'll never fit in." And I'd whisper back quietly, "Looks like I fit in just fine now." I wish I could say I cared for Evelyn out of love. That time softened me and turned bitterness into forgiveness. But that would be a lie. The truth is, every time I saw her sitting helplessly by that window, I felt a kind of peace that I hadn't known before. Not joy, not cruelty, but justice. I didn't need to say much. Life had already delivered the lesson she'd refused to learn. Her mansion, once full of parties, polished marble, and laughter that never reached the heart, was now silent except for the hum of the medical equipment I'd arranged. The staff had left. Daniel couldn't afford them anymore. His business had been struggling, and he spent more time begging investors than visiting his mother. So it was me, the outsider, the woman who would never fit in, who kept the house running. Sometimes she'd look at me with wide, terrified eyes when I entered her room. Maybe she expected revenge, the cruel kind, the kind she had once inflicted so effortlessly. But I didn't need to raise my voice. My presence was punishment enough. One afternoon I brought her tea. She watched me as I placed it on the table beside her wheelchair. Her fingers trembled as she tried to hold the cup but failed. I reached out and helped her. Her lips moved. It took a few seconds before I understood the slurred whisper. "Why you?" I leaned closer. "Because no one else would." She blinked rapidly, tears filling her eyes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was regret. But it came too late. The weeks turned into months. I handled her bills, her appointments, her food, her laundry. Every task she once believed was beneath her. The irony was almost poetic. The woman who ruled her home with iron perfection was now completely dependent on the one she had humiliated. At first, I thought I'd eventually grow numb to it. But the opposite happened. Each act of care became an act of power. Every time she thanked me in her broken voice, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. One evening Daniel stopped by. His eyes were tired, his shirt wrinkled. "Mom told me you've been amazing," he said, guilt in his voice. I didn't think you'd do it." I smiled faintly. "Neither did I." He sighed. "You've changed, Julia." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Daniel. I just stopped being who she wanted me to be. There wasn't much left between us. We both knew it. The love that once bound us had withered under years of silence and manipulation. Still I stayed, because leaving before the end would have been too merciful. It was late autumn when the moment of true reckoning arrived. The house felt colder than usual, and Evelyn's health had taken a turn. She could no longer stand without help. Her words were few, but her eyes followed me everywhere, full of questions she could never ask. That evening, as I adjusted her blanket, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was weak but desperate. "Julia," she whispered, voice trembling. "Sorry." I froze. It was the first time she'd said it. For years I'd imagined what this moment would feel like. Triumph, satisfaction, maybe closure. But standing there, looking down at the frail woman who once made me cry myself to sleep, all I felt was emptiness. I took a breath and knelt beside her. "You don't have to be sorry, Evelyn," I said softly. "You taught me everything I needed to survive. How to be strong. How to fight. How to win without mercy." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she understood that forgiveness was never part of the deal. "Now," I added, standing up, "you can rest. I'll take care of everything. Just like I always do." She closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought she'd drifted away. Over the next few weeks I began to manage her estate, her accounts, her properties, her investments. Daniel had no idea how much responsibility she'd handed me. After her stroke, she'd signed power of attorney over to me for convenience, trusting the only person who still showed up. So when the lawyers called me into the office after her passing 2 months later, even I was shocked by what I found. Evelyn Harper had left everything to me. Not to Daniel. Not to her family. To me. The lawyer looked at me confused. "She changed the will 3 weeks before her death. Said you were the only one who ever truly cared for her." I sat there, silent, emotions swirling. A mix of disbelief, justice, and something almost like grief. She had built her life on walls and pride. And in the end, the only person she trusted was the one she'd once tried to destroy. When Daniel found out, he was furious. "You manipulated her," he shouted. "You made her sign those papers." I didn't even raise my voice. "No, Daniel. She made her choice. Maybe she finally saw who actually cared for her." He glared at me, eyes filled with resentment. "You think you've won?" I took a deep breath and looked him straight in the eye. "I didn't have to win, Daniel. She just lost the game she created. That was the last time I saw him. The mansion is mine now." I walked through the halls she once ruled, my heels echoing against marble floors that used to intimidate me. The portraits of her ancestors still hang on the walls, their cold eyes following me as if judging the audacity of the woman who now owns their legacy. But I don't flinch anymore. Every corner of this house carries memories of her cruelty, and my rise from it. I didn't burn it down. I rebuilt myself inside it. That's the difference between vengeance and victory. Sometimes I stand by the window where she used to sit, watching the sun set over the garden. And I whisper, just loud enough for the wind to carry it away. "You were right, Evelyn. I never fit in." A small smile touches my lips. I outgrew it. A year later, Harper House, as people still call it, has become the headquarters for my company. I renovated the place completely, replaced the heavy drapes with open glass, turned the ballroom into an event space, and transformed the study into my office. The first plaque by the entrance reads, "Julia Harper Foundation, empowering women to rebuild after adversity." Yes, I kept her name. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of what power looks like when it's redefined. Every month, I host a gathering for women who've been told they'll never fit in. We sit in that same grand room where she once whispered those words to me. Only now, laughter fills the space instead of judgment. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I can almost hear her voice again. Critical, cold, distant. But then I remember the woman I've become. I remember the battles I fought in silence. And I realize that my revenge was never about making her suffer. It was about becoming everything she said I couldn't be.